Back in 1944, there was an elderly French milkmaid in the countryside just outside of Paris. Now, the German Gestapo would see her doing her duties during the daylight hours and wouldn't think much about her. You know, she was old-looking, cracked teeth, strong wrinkles, gray hair, bulky skirts, and kind of had a little bit of a hobble as she walked. And honestly, with the Allies pretty much sure to strike any day, the Nazis didn't know where they were striking, and so they weren't really paying attention to this old peasant woman. And it turns out that was a huge mistake for them. So during the day, this old lady put on the front of a milkmaid, but by night she engaged in her real life. Her real name was Virginia Hall. She was a British-born American spy. And now the Nazis knew that there was someone called the Limping Lady that was a spy, and they were worried about her. But all they knew about her was that she was a British spy that lost her leg in a hunting accident and moved intelligence by hiding documents in her prosthetic leg. Now the Gestapo called her the world's most dangerous spy. But she had escaped, and no one knew her real identity. And she started working for the Americans, and they certainly didn't know that this old lady outside of Paris was actually her. So while she went from shop to shop during the day, seemingly living as any other French peasant woman, the Nazis simply just thought that's who she was. But the rest of the time, she was actually training and coordinating with the French resistance movement in that area. And in 1944, just before D-Day, she helped pave the way for the Allies, who of course would strike, and she did it by having a team cutting phone lines, derailing freight trains, and blowing up 4 different bridges. And this was instrumental in preventing the Nazi reinforcements from not only getting to Normandy to stop the invasion, but also preventing German retreats from Normandy. So she would later be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross by President Truman. You can see up there in the picture. She was awarded that for her efforts. So what does that have to do with today's message in our church vision? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Just because you look like someone on one day doesn't mean you look like them every other day. Now, that's something that should not describe a Christian. We should be the same people no matter where we are, but the sad truth is it often does. We're often different on different days and in different places. How many country songs are there in the world that say something like, I was in church on Sunday and cussing on Monday? There's a lot, actually. Really, what you're saying in that song is you want to act a certain day on Sunday at church, and then for the rest of the week, you want to be who you really are. Well, I hate to break it to you, church, but I don't think Jesus only wants us to follow him on Sunday. Therefore, today's message is covering all the other days of the week, all right? So if you're following along in your sermon notes today, today's message is called Influence. And we're right in the middle of our vision series, so it's kind of an unusual time. If you're just visiting today here for the first time or haven't been in a while, it might be a little weird because we've been going through this series talking about our church vision. But I still think that this is something good for any Christian or any believer to hear. So let's go ahead and go over our vision for those who haven't heard about it and as a review for those of you that have. So what are the 4 words that our vision centers around? Connect, grow, serve, influence. All right? Obviously today we're talking about influence. Now up until this point we've been talking about all of the personal side of our vision, the things that affect our personal lives, not necessarily part of church structure. Now, if you think about, this shape up here, and think of it as a graph, if you go back to, junior high or high school or algebra, whatever, and think of it like a graph, right, like a crossing line graph, there's 2 different axes there. The first one is a graph that talks about where we spend our time, right? Connect is our time at church, and influence is our time spent everywhere else, where we live, work, and play. And we want to balance those 2 things out. Don't want to spend too much time at church, but also not too much time not at church, right? Now, the other axis is actually what we spend our time doing, all right? Grow is all about God inflowing into us, and serve is about us turning that inflow into an overflow for others, okay? And that axis also needs to be balanced, because you don't want to just grow all the time and never serve, but you also don't want to just serve and never grow. So as I said, we're talking about the influence portion today, and I want to begin by explaining kind of the dynamic between connect and influence, time at church and time not at church, because they're very much related to each other. Let me explain it to you this way. How do you feel when you go into a Target or go into a Starbucks, right? Think of that experience, right? You probably don't walk into Target and be like, I'm really a part of something here, right? Like I'm doing something great because I'm at Target, right? Like, you probably don't feel that way. Now, when you go to a Bears or a Cardinals game, you might feel a little bit more something there, right? Like, you might feel like, I'm a fan, so I belong here. You might use words like we and us when you talk about that. Like, you might say something like, oh, that trade was good for us, or like, oh, like, we lost again because we're a Bears fan, right? Like, there's like a, we, us, a personal buy-in to what you're doing, okay? But there is still a little bit of a disconnect because you're just a fan, right? You don't have a contract. Maybe you do, but I don't think you probably have a contract, or you don't own the team. There's not really like an interest there. You follow it, but you don't really engage in it. You're not part of it, right? Well, sadly for a lot of us in church, we feel one of those two ways. Either we're just completely a patron here, or like, I'm like kind of a fan, but like I'm not really invested, right? And I was thinking about that this week, and I came across an article by Carrie Nieuwhof called "Why Attending Church No Longer Makes Sense." And I thought, oh, this is going to be a good one. What kind of benefit is there going to be for staying at home and never going to church? But actually, when I read the article, I went, oh, I get it. So actually, here's a quote from the beginning of the article. Carrie Nieuwhof said, "You don't attend church. You are the church. Merely attending church doesn't make you much of a church because sitting in a back row consuming church doesn't make you very good at being the church." And I was like, oh, I get it. Too many people just attend. I'm just going to attend church, and that's it. The way we attend a hockey game or we attend a concert. You're there, you see a performance, and then when you're done, you go back to who you really are. Go back to your normal life. And oftentimes, things look very different from that setting versus your normal setting. A lot of churches kind of reinforce this if you think about it, right? A lot of churches measure success by one metric. What metric do most churches use to measure success? Attendance. Attendance. How many people were here? Now, that's not a bad metric to use. We use that metric, right? Heck, the early church used it. Open your Bible. Jesus fed 4,000 and then 5,000. While the church was waiting for the Holy Spirit after Jesus' ascension, there was about 120. Then the Holy Spirit came. They started preaching, and they added 3,000. So they counted their attendance in the early church. So there's nothing wrong with counting attendance, but the problem is when that's all you care about, right? As long as we have someone in the seats, who cares about their lives? You see, church, there's way more to following Jesus than just showing up to a building for 1 hour a week. Matter of fact, this is your first fill in the blank this morning. Following Jesus doesn't stop on Monday morning. Following Jesus doesn't stop on Monday morning. Karl Marx said, religion is the opiate of the masses. Anybody ever heard that quote before? Religion is the opiate of the masses? I actually really disagree with that quote. I think there's some truth to it, but then you start thinking about all the wars and the movements and the nations that were started because people didn't want to buy into that religion and bought into another one. It wasn't very opiatizing. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. People trying not to be controlled by another religion, right? I'm going to fight or I'm going to push, right? I would actually argue that religion has been the motivator of the masses. Now, those motivations haven't always been good, but I think that the church has done a lot more good than we give it credit for sometimes. Now, when I think of the opiate of the masses, particularly today, I think of some different things. If I had to come up with one label for something I think is the opiate of the masses in our country today, I would say it's consumerism, that mentality. Of course, that begins with consuming products, right? Did you know the average person sees 8,000 ads a day? That's twice as much as 2007 and 12 times as much as 1970. That's how many ads we see a day. The ads tell us things too, right? What do they try to tell you in those advertisements? If we buy something, it's going to fix all our problems, right? If you don't buy it, you're going to be missing out. Come on, you deserve it. We'll help you get it. We offer financing, right? But it doesn't end with us just getting stuff, though. Consumerism just isn't about buying things, right? It goes into more things because it changes our mentality because people want to buy more stuff if it's cheap or if it's convenient, right? You go to Wendy's because you can get a 4 for $4. Every fast food chain has a dollar menu, and it's super convenient. And convenience is so important to us that sometimes we'll even spend more money if it's more convenient, right? Think about a convenience store. It's the same stuff you can buy in a grocery store, but it's more convenient to pay more money and go in there, right? We pay for convenience. Think about Amazon and Wayfair and Temu, right? How many of us have been on the Temu train lately? There's a lot of shameful hands trying not to go up right now. I see you like, do I lift it? I don't know. right? You go on there's all the fun games to play, and it's like, what? I can get like a new car for like $300? Like, what is going on here? Right? All those sites exploded because we can buy stuff cheap from our homes. We don't even have to get off the couch. I can just press a button and in 2 days it'll magically appear. Did you know the average American, not household, the average American individual spends $18,000 a year on stuff they don't need, non-essential goods? But what's worse is the mentality that brings, right? Like it's like, oh, we need this quick and easy. I need it now. And then we start bringing in other things, right? We start consuming things like social media, right? Social media gives us wild amounts of dopamine into our brains that don't make any sense. Now, dopamine is a natural part of the human existence. We get dopamine hits if good things happen. But never in human history has a human been able to get that much dopamine by going like this. It's wild. Now, there's also another thing that has taken the place of natural human existence that brings us wild dopamine levels in an instant, and that's something called pornography. You used to have to do something shameful, go buy a video, walk into a store, get caught going somewhere you don't want to go, but now it's right on your phone, you carry it around every day. And that also gives you wild amounts of dopamine. And some people argue, oh, no. It brings relaxation, it relieves stress, and does all these other good things. Matter of fact, my friend had a secular therapist. When he was dealing with stress, she said, have you tried pornography as the solution? And he was like, no. Because yes, there is an instant stress reliever with pornography, but the problem is, over time, it is a stressor. Pornography becomes a stressor. And not only that, it leads to things like ED and low sexual desire and adds a plethora of problems relationally for couples. Because it's all about getting what you want, when you want it, with a very small amount of work to get it. And then that encourages us to become addicted to it, and then we put unrealistic expectations on our partners. Right? It doesn't make any sense. We consume these things. We just bring in these things that I'm just not really sure that they're that good for us. But I mean, the Bible talks about how we can do things as long as they're not harmful, and we have freedom in things and stuff like that. And some people are like, well, there's nothing wrong with some of these consumeristic things, and I agree with that. But how much time do we spend doing those things? I was curious. How much time do we spend doing things that I don't think bring a whole lot of benefit to our lives? So I looked it up. The average American in 1 week spends how many hours watching TV? 28 hours a week watching TV. 28 hours a week watching TV. Plus 18 more hours on social media. Plus somewhere between 35 minutes to 2 hours watching pornography. And then 6 hours shopping on the internet. Add those up, you're between 52 and 54 hours a week. Add your 40-hour work week on top of that, 56 hours to sleep, 10 hours to eat in the week, and you're now at 158 hours, which leaves you less than an hour and a half per day to get dressed, go to the bathroom, drive to work, hang out with your family, pay the bills, and cut the grass. And then I talk to people, and it's like, I don't have time to go to church. I don't have time to witness to my neighbor. I don't have time to read the Word of God. I don't have time to pray. It's like, you sure don't, because look at how much time you spend on social media and TV. And some people are worse than those numbers. That's just the average. Here's a question for you guys. Raise your hand. How many of us in here have read through the entire Bible? Pretty good amount. I'm proud of you, church. Both first and second service, I would say more people have read the entire Bible than have not. That's pretty good. Now, if you haven't read the entire Bible, because you don't think you have time to do it, let's do the math here. How much time do you think you have to spend per day to read the Bible in order to finish it in just a year? Most of us have been Christians for more than a year. So if you would have taken just 1 year to read through the Bible, you could have done it, okay? How much time per day do you think it takes? Let's do the math. Average person reads 250 words per minute. The Bible has between 750,000 and 790,000 words in it, depending on your translation, so we'll shoot for the middle. That means it would take you about 8.5 minutes per day to finish the Bible in a year. You don't have 8.5 minutes in a day? Really? Well, let's just say, okay, let's take some TV time, just a little bit of it, not all of it. Let's just take some of that TV time and put that towards doing some good things. Let's take 8.5 minutes of TV time per day and put that towards reading the Bible. Let's take another 10 minutes and pray. Let's take 20 minutes in just a week and talk to your neighbor. All right? Then let's go to church for an hour. Life group for 2, okay? We'll stop there. That's the way you're doing it. how much TV time would you lose in a week or per day? How much time would you lose by doing those things? 48 minutes a day to do all those things. That means you could still watch TV for 3 hours and 12 minutes. But I can't finish a show in 12 minutes, so give it to the ads, right? See another 10,000 of them in a year or whatever it is, okay? See, it's 8.5 minutes. That's nothing. See, I believe that we have slowly, our society, if there's an opiate that we're going for, it's just convenience and comfortability, and I want to take some things, and it's turning us into these irresponsible, depressed, addicted, lazy parasites. I don't even want to feel my feelings anymore. I just want to take pills or drink, right? And it's just like we're just turning into these, we just add more things to us, and we wonder why we're miserable. And then I look at the life of Christ and the disciples, and I'm like, these don't really look the same. Maybe I'm wrong, church. Maybe I'm totally off on this, right? Maybe I'm totally wrong. But then I look at how we live, and it's like, all the plastic in the ocean, right? From convenient things, or outrageous amounts of food being wasted, or people in other countries being forced to work in sweatshops so our clothes are cheap. And it's like, are we doing a good thing here? Is this what we're supposed to be doing? Like I said, maybe I'm wrong. I totally admit, church, I could be wrong. I'm not trying to stand up here and tell you, trying to go outside my boundaries here. But I think it's worth asking the question, does this look like the life Jesus asked us to live? I can't help but feel like as the church, we're supposed to be a little bit better than those statistics. And I think probably for most of us we are, right? I realize this doesn't apply to everyone. Some of us don't watch TV at all. But some of us watch TV for 10, 12 hours a day. So what's my point here? What's the point? Well, it's actually pretty simple. As God's people, we have a responsibility to do good things. And those good things don't end when we walk out of these doors. We can do good things when we get home, when we go to work, when we're out with our friends or whatever. Turn to Matthew chapter 16, verse 16. We're going to see what Jesus has to say about this. In verse 16, Jesus had asked his disciples, hey, who do you guys think I am? And here's what Peter says, verse 16. Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now, a lot of you have probably heard an analysis of this passage before, right? Peter is acknowledging that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and Jesus says, yes, that is true, and on that rock, the fact that I am the Son of God is what the church will be built from. I am the cornerstone, the first stone that is laid in building this church. I am that rock. So good job, Peter. And then Jesus says this weird thing about hell. And he says that the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. But sometimes when we think about that, it's like, oh, okay, so the church, when hell is trying to beat the church, we're not going to lose, right? But it's interesting because that's not what Jesus says. Jesus says that the gates aren't going to work. Now, I don't know if you know this, but gates are not an offensive weapon. Hell isn't coming after the church with gates trying to beat us with gates. No, Satan wants to keep things as they are, so he puts up gates to defend his kingdom on this earth, and the church is supposed to be the attackers. We're the ones bringing good things to this earth. That's our mission. And Jesus says when the church is out there doing its job, Satan can't stop us. That's what that verse is saying. We are the attackers. See, we don't come to church, we don't attend church just to check it off the list. We gather as the church to empower us to go back out there and keep being who we're supposed to be. Who we are in here is who we're supposed to be out there. And I should point out that it needs to be out there. Out there needs it. Some of us can't stand the way the world looks. And I get it, right? You look at the world and it's like, man, there's a lot of sin out there. It's dark, it's ugly. I get it. But we have to be careful when we start separating ourselves from that. See, Christ followers are not meant to isolate ourselves in our own safe little communities where we don't know anything that's going on. In fact, here's your next fill in the blank. Connect without influence isolates you in a Christian bubble. Ah, yes, the Christian bubble. Anybody ever heard of the Christian bubble before? Right? It's the people who go to church and Bible study and life group and youth group and only Christian concerts and only watch Angel and Pure Flix on TV and only watch Christian comedians and VeggieTales and go to Christian schools and Christian colleges and Christian banks and would never eat anywhere but Chick-fil-A. And it's like, we're only going to be in our Christian this. Don't you dare even look outside, right? Now, none of those things are bad things. The Christian banks, the Christian ministries, the going to church, all of those things are good things. However, if you only do that and you don't have any idea that there's a world out there that desperately needs to hear about Christ, then we're missing something. You have to have a Christian community, and it's good to support Christian efforts, but at the same time, we have to remember the world that needs Jesus just as much as we did. We're not called to either one of those things exclusively. In John 17, Jesus is praying to God for the sake of his people, his followers. He's praying on our behalf, essentially. What does Jesus ask the Father for us when he's praying? John 17:15. Jesus says, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. See, Jesus doesn't want us falling into the traps that Satan leaves for us as we're in this world, but Jesus makes it very clear at the beginning, hey, Lord, I'm not asking you to take them out because they're supposed to be in this world. The world needs Jesus' followers. See, he doesn't want us avoiding the world altogether. And I admit that for me personally, this is one thing that has been a challenge. As a pastor, not living in a Christian bubble is really hard. You know, I used to work in a secular paper mill that was full of opportunities to witness to people who didn't know Jesus. But then I went to Christian college and became full-time at a church, and I started coaching sports at a Christian school, and all my friends were Christians. And some people would be like, oh, you must share the gospel all the time with unbelievers as a pastor. And it's like, no. Look around the church. There's probably not a whole lot of unbelievers in here, right? Because I don't know if this is going to shock you, but like unbelievers don't go to church, so when do I see them? Right? It's not very often. So when Tosh and we started donating plasma a couple months ago, I was like, yes, I love this. And it's not the money because honestly, like Tosh does all the money. I don't ever see it. I don't really feel it. I'm grateful to God for the, everything he provides and for my wife for having the ability to do all of our money. But like, I'm not like, when more money comes in, I don't get excited because I don't even know. I'm like one of the kids. I don't even know. So, but when it comes to donating plasma, I was like, I love going. Because the second you walk into that place, everybody is like, F this and F that and F you. And I'm like, yes. Not because of what they're doing, but because that means now I have an opportunity. Because now I know that there are people that need to know about the good news. There's already 2 people who have said that they're going to come to church. Others don't even know that I'm working on them. And the other day where I'm like sitting in line trying to get in there to give, and I'm like looking back, like, where is Tosh? What is she doing? I look back there and she's like getting checked in and she's got holding the guy's hands and praying for him. I'm like, yes, this is the best place ever. Why don't more people do this? Right? And like the truth is, all it is just one opportunity of millions. We all have opportunities every day to do things like that. It's not that hard. It's really not. That's just a field that has been plowed and planted by God, and we're just there trying to do some harvesting. Super simple. I'm not going in there with a bullhorn like, hey, sinners. It's simple. Just loving on them and talking to church. Hey, if you ever want to come, you're welcome. And a lot of us, like, we see unbelievers and we're like, ew, they're not behaving like Christians. It's like, of course they're not. They're not Christians. Why do we expect the world to be good when they don't know the Lord? And how are they going to get to know the Lord? And it really bothers me that, like, a lot of people think, like, oh, I know how we're going to fix this. Let's make laws. Let's do it with the politicians. Politicians are going to bring Jesus in? Have you heard them talk? I don't think so. It's like the answer isn't politics. Politics just reveals the state of where we are. If we want to change people's hearts, we have to show them the Lord. They have to have people in their lives, Christians, who are willing to invest. That's where the change comes from. Just because you make it illegal to sin doesn't mean that they don't still want to. It takes the Lord working on them. And God makes it very clear the way that they learn about who He is by us sharing it. Laws don't change people's hearts, but God does through His church. So do we need to be in church? Yes. Do we need to be in the world? Yes. It's both. Now, am I saying all of us need to go start giving plasma? We're going to turn into a CrossPoint Plasma Center? No. But see, church, there's lots of opportunities out there. Out where we work and we live and we play, there are tons of opportunities to share the gospel with people. That's why it's important to know this about the next point. Influence is both unique and layered. Now, what do I mean by that? Unique and layered. Well, first of all, everyone's life is unique, right? We all have these different situations. You might be an engineer, or you might be a truck driver, or you might be retired, or you might be a stay-at-home mom, or you might be a student, right? We have all these different areas that we're in. It's different. You could be single, or married, or divorced, or have 5 kids, or 10 kids, or grandkids, or whatever, right? You might play rec league hockey, or play in a band on the weekends, or lead a Girl Scout troop, right? We have all these different things that people do. Those are all opportunities to influence, to take what we do in church and carry it into the world. So influence is varied, but it is also layered. Like you probably have multiple categories, right? Like think about it. You might be an asphalt pouring, child rearing, home renovating, guitar shredding metalhead, right? You do all those things. Or you might be a single video gaming, homemaking college student. Right? All these different layers of opportunities that we have in our lives. And those things are constantly changing, right? So sometimes it's like, yeah, I used to serve in a shelter, but now my kids are little and I don't really have much time to. Or it's like, yeah, now I have more time to spend with my woodworking buddies because I'm retired. Or it's like, well, now I don't have as much time with my grandkids as I used to because I'm starting a business. Right? Things are shifting and we have to learn to prioritize and organize those things, and it can be a challenge. Right? Sometimes we do that for good, sometimes we do that for bad. It's all about prioritizing according to God. So here comes a paper mill story, church, so you guys can mark that off on your bingo cards if you're keeping track on that stuff. When I worked at the mill, there was a guy that got into an argument with his wife. Their kid got a cold. She took her to the doctor. He had to work. She got mad. She said, "Your family's supposed to come first. Obviously, to you, the job comes first." She was angry. And through their conversation, it became clear that, in her opinion, anything your kid needs, no matter what, should always come before anything that your job needs. And it's like, I think prioritization is a little bit less black and white than that. It's a little more gray, right? Had his daughter been going into anaphylactic shock, I'm sure he wouldn't have gone to work, right? If this was just an unscheduled overtime day, he probably wouldn't have gone and gone with his wife to take the kid to the doctor. But on a normally scheduled day that you have to be there when your kid has the sniffles, he's like, I'm not calling off, right? So there's layers there, right? It depends on what's going on. It's not every single thing comes above every single thing, right? They blend and it depends. And that can be a challenge to figure that stuff out, to figure out what does come before. Is this good? Is this bad? We have to learn to check ourselves. You know, nothing about influence is one size fits all, church. And so really, if it can't be one size fits all, then our church can't program it. I can't come to you and be like, here's how you live your life. You have to do this till you're 18, then you have to do this, then you have to get married, and you have to have kids. Like, there is no formula that we all have to follow so that all of our lives are the same and we just walk around like robots. Like, everybody's different. And so, since the church can't program that stuff, here's your next fill in the blank. The church's role and influence is to educate and encourage. Right? I can't tell you everything you have to do, but we can educate you on what the Bible says, and we can encourage you to do the right thing when you're out of these four walls. I mean, the job of the church can't be to do everything with you. Your lives, to a large degree, have to be lived alone, right? Or at least not at the church. So you have to figure out how to take the principles of the Bible and apply it to your life. Even the Bible, when the Bible talks about this, is generic. We read this last week, Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord. I mean, Paul, he doesn't get specific. He's just like, whatever it is you're doing, do it for God. Because he can't make a specific list of everything you got to do, right? So we have to do it. When you're raising kids, do it for God. When you're at work for 12 hours, every second belongs to God. When you're sleeping, make sure you get enough rest for your vessel for God, right? We're not going to send an elder home with you to babysit you to make sure you go to sleep on time. We're not going to send a deacon to your house to whip you into, or to your job to whip you into shape, make sure you're doing your job. But we can train you in the instructions of God, and we can encourage you to keep doing well. Just like 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. So you see the connection between connect and influence, where at the church you teach and you encourage, and then we go out and we live it, and then we come back. There's a cycle there. But there's still that question that I keep asking through this whole process. Every single one of these that we've looked at, I've asked the question, does Jesus teach this? I mean, is this just Dan's idea where it's like, hey, here's a good idea, we should influence the world? Or is this Jesus' idea? Did he live it? Did he give us an example? Does he give us any instructions? Well, I think the answer is yes. Not only does Jesus go off by himself to be alone with God, eat meals at friends' houses, and have his feet washed, which is him getting his grow time in the influence category, right? But he also serves during his influence time because he heals at Bethesda and in the streets and at his friends' houses, and he performs miracles at weddings and in remote places and in boats and as he walks on the water, and he teaches from mountaintops and from boats and from in homes, right? And not only did Jesus live his life this way, where he grows and he serves outside of the church, but he also tells us to do it. Actually, one of the most famous passages in Scripture, with some of his very final words here on the earth, he says this in Matthew 28:18. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age." Right? So Jesus steps in, he says, "Hey guys, I have absolute authority. I can command you to do anything I want. So here's what I want you to do with my absolute power. Go and make disciples." Go. Don't just hang out in the temple or hang out in your church. Go out everywhere. Share with people. Grow with them. Show them how to be disciples, not just in church, but out there with them. So here's your last fill in the blank. Jesus commands us to influence outside the church. So we have to grow when we're outside the church. The Bible belongs in your home. Prayer belongs in your workplace. Worship is to be done with your kids. And we have to serve outside the church as well. We are to be humble for the good of our teammates. We are to comfort our neighbors. We are to offer help to our spouses when they need it. That's what we're supposed to do. So church, that's all four. We've hit them now. Connect, grow, serve, influence. We grow and we serve at church, and we grow and we serve everywhere else. And we have to learn to balance those four things. If you remember the airplane illustration I gave in the second week, that we're constantly moving towards Christ, but we need to balance all four of those things as we're pursuing him. And so next week, we're going to start taking a look at the other side of our vision. We've been talking just about our personal lives in regards to the vision. Next week, we're going to start looking at how our church structure will align to help us carry these principles. But today, I'm going to leave you with a challenge before I go. Here's the challenge. Take some time today, tomorrow, this week, but seriously, take some time, even during the next song. Take some time, examine your life. That's the challenge. Examine your life. Are you taking a healthy, balanced approach to all of these areas in your life? Think about your life at the church. Are you invested in things that will help you grow? Are you fairly invested in serving others? And then think about your life outside the church. Are you invested in things that will help you grow at home, at work, and where you live, and where you play? And are you invested in things to help you, are you serving in those same places as well? Are you invested in growing and serving outside of the church? And if you're not, it's time to make some adjustments so you don't become a freeloader or you get burned out.